Welcome back to The Explainer. We've all been there, right? Staring at a massive pile of parts, maybe some unassembled furniture, or trying to configure a complex piece of software, and the manual in your hands is just complete gibberish. We've all felt that universal frustration of poorly written instructions. It can literally ruin your day. But creating clear, effective instructions is actually a highly refined art form, one that blends hardcore technical know-how with deep, genuine empathy for the user. So let's dive right in and look at exactly how the pros transform confusing procedures into crystal clear user guides. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the instruction frustration, look at why you need to plan before you write, dive into the anatomy of great instructions, talk about writing steps like a pro, tackle formatting and visual design, and finally wrap up with scaling up to user guides. Let's get into it. Okay, Section 1, the instruction frustration and why empathy in technical writing is absolutely crucial. So it turns out that writing solid instructions isn't just a matter of jotting down a list of steps. I mean, sure, clear writing and technical knowledge, those are your baseline requirements. But the real secret sauce here? Empathy and visualization. You literally have to put yourself in your reader's shoes. Ask yourself, can you visualize this entire procedure from the perspective of a total beginner? And honestly, do you have the willingness to actually test your instructions on the exact type of person you wrote them for? Without that human touch, even the most technically perfect document is going to fall flat. Moving right along to Section 2, plan before you write, specifically analyzing audience and complexity. You know, before you even type a single word, you got to nail down the structure. Are we talking about a simple task like changing a tire or something wild? Think about those super complex botanical Lego sets. Some of those have what, over 150 steps? Just handing the user a list from 1 to 150 is frankly terrifying. And this perfectly highlights the idea of a phase. A phase is just a group of similar steps within a single task procedure. By breaking a massive build down into phases, like say building the stem first and then building the petals, and restarting your numbers for each phase, you take a monumental, overwhelming task and make it feel totally manageable. Another massive piece of the planning puzzle is focus. Look at the difference between task orientation and tools orientation. Task orientation is all about what the user actually wants to achieve, stuff like recording a greeting or saving messages. Tools orientation, on the other hand, focuses on the features themselves, like dedicating a whole section to the copy button. Spoiler alert, the task-oriented approach wins almost every time. Why? Because users usually don't care what a button does in a vacuum. They just want to get their job done. Focus your headings and steps on the actual tasks the reader wants to perform. All right, Section 3, Anatomy of Great Instructions, Building the Blueprint of Clarity. Every great instructional document relies on a very specific structural blueprint. Take a look at these mandatory sections. Your title should be totally action-oriented, like how to clean your microwave, instead of some clunky noun phrase. You also need a clear intro to define the scope and a list of equipment. But check out what's right under the title, the date. Now, why is a simple date such a big deal? Well, in the technical world, version control is everything. That date is literally the only way to ensure your reader is working from the current instructions and not some outdated manual that's going to cause a disaster. Now, baked right into that blueprint are your special notices. Professionals actually use a very strict hierarchy here to flag hazards. And this isn't just about being helpful. This is about protecting the user from harm and protecting the company from massive liability. Danger is the top tier. That's reserved for severe bodily harm or death. Warning means bodily harm or major product damage. Caution just lets them know a potential risk exists, so be careful. And a note is purely for extra details or troubleshooting. Getting these right and using them consistently is absolutely non-negotiable. That brings us to Section 4, Writing Steps Like a Pro, using active voice and action verbs. When you actually sit down to write the steps, you're mostly going to be using fixed order steps. These are chronological actions that have to happen in a set sequence, like doing an oil change. Notice here how the direct instruction, the action itself, is clearly separated from all the extra explanation. A fantastic pro tip? Bold your action verbs. Seriously, do it. That way, if a user is just skimming the page while holding a heavy wrench, the exact action jumps right out at them, and the supplementary why or how text doesn't get in the way. Now, this might actually go against what you learned in high school English, but using the passive voice in instructions is a massive trap. Look at this passive example. The timer button is then set to 3. As a reader, you're looking at that thinking, wait, are you talking to me? Is it already set? It's just confusing. But compare that to the active imperative voice. Set the timer to 3. Boom. Direct command. It grabs your attention and leaves absolutely zero doubt about who is supposed to be pressing that button. It's you. But here's the catch. While we want to be direct, we definitely don't want to sound like malfunctioning machines. This quote hits the nail on the head. Avoid telegraphic writing. Sometimes writers try to be so hyper-concise that they drop words like the, or an. You end up with stuff like press pause button on front panel to stop display. True, robots write that way, but we don't have to. You aren't saving enough ink to justify sounding like you're demanding to be taken to their leader. Just use complete, natural sentences to keep that human connection.
Moving into Section 5, Formatting and Visual Design, and how to create scannable hierarchies.
Formatting isn't just about making things look pretty. It's a visual cue for how to process information. While most steps are fixed order, meaning they have to be sequential, which is exactly why we use numbered lists, sometimes steps are variable order. Think of a troubleshooting guide. You can check those things in any order, right? So use a bulleted list there so the reader doesn't feel boxed into a strict sequence. You can also use alternate steps with a big or between bullets, or nested steps indented as A, B, and C for those super complex actions. The layout itself instantly tells the user how to tackle the task. And guys, here is the absolute golden rule of visual design for instructions. Proximity. You must always place your warnings and graphics directly next to or right before the step they relate to. I mean, think about it. If there's a serious danger associated with step 3, you cannot put the warning at the bottom of the page. By the time they read it, the user will have already zapped themselves. Keep your graphics and special notices visually locked to the exact moment the reader actually needs them. So far, we've been zooming in on the micro level, the steps, the lists, the sentences. But what happens when your product needs way more than a simple 2-page pamphlet? How do you handle a massive piece of enterprise software or complex hardware? That takes us to our final section, Section 6, Scaling Up to User Guides and Managing Complex Documentation. A full-blown user guide can easily run anywhere from 20 to 200 pages, and producing a beast like that requires a seriously tight internal process. You can't just open a blank doc and start typing. It kicks off with initial planning to really assess audience needs. Then you draft an official documentation plan. After that comes prototyping, and then you're running the gauntlet of multiple review drafts with technical experts and usability testers. Finally, and only when everyone agrees it's foolproof, do you get sign-off and hit production. It is a highly managed, rigorous journey. Now, a really crucial part of that middle phase is the prototype. A prototype is basically a dummy version of the book that shows exactly how every single element is going to look, usually filled with that classic lorem ipsum placeholder text. When you pair that with a style catalog, which locks in rules like every level 1 heading must be 24-point Arial bold, you guarantee that whether the manual is 50 pages or 500, the visual language stays perfectly consistent. And that consistency is exactly what stops your reader from getting completely lost. As we wrap things up today, we really have to talk about the real-world stakes here. Writing instructions isn't just some grammar exercise. It carries massive legal and ethical weight. Poorly or carelessly designed instructions don't just annoy your customers. They can leave you or your company directly liable for damages, and they will absolutely wreck your brand's credibility. If someone gets hurt or bricks a $1,000 machine because your guide was vague, the consequences are severe. This is exactly why usability testing and peer review are never, ever optional. Which brings us to a final thought to close out this explainer. The Humble User Manual is, without a doubt, one of the most critical pieces of communication any company puts out into the world. It is the literal bridge between your amazing product and a successful user experience. So the next time you're tasked with writing a how-to, whether it's a quick cheat sheet for your team or a massive guide for a flagship product, ask yourself, are you going to leave them guessing, or are you going to use these structural tools and empathy to design a guaranteed path to success? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and keep learning.